Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Giraldi.
What's going on, guys?
And today we are going to get into our wide receiver start sits for week 8. And then we're also going to talk about some wide receiver cornerback matchups. And we're going to kind of add that as a little bit as a segment to the end of this video. So hopefully that'll be some good added content. Maybe we'll have a dedicated video of that moving forward, but we'll check out how it does this week. The first start that we're going to talk about is George Pickens going up against the Giants here in week 8. I know you're excited about this, but obviously Russell Wilson looking very good has a big part in why we're going to be so high on Pickens this week.
We knew that the quarterback change would be a big boost for Pickens. Like, he and Russ kind of have that style of backyard football that, I think is going to work really well together going forward. We were complaining about his snap share a couple weeks prior, and, he wasn't necessarily in the good graces of the coaching staff, but he got that snap percentage up to 79% last week. Led the team with 9 targets, which was good for a 31% target share. He faces the Giants this week, who are kind of the middle of the pack in terms of fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. Now, I will say with Pickens, like he does have a pretty low floor. Like, if they don't connect on some of those longer throws, maybe they grind it out on the ground, maybe he doesn't score. But with his upside in the new way in which this offense looks, I'm riding the hot hand here with George Pickens.
Yeah, and like you said, maybe they don't connect, but that would mean they don't connect on like any of the 5 or 6 throws that they make. I mean, Russ is going to sling it down the field. He had 3 big plays. He had a pass interference called. This offense is going to open up. And when Russ sees that Pickens is going to be one-on-one on the boundary, he is going to be throwing the ball there. He doesn't have quite the deep ball he used to. He doesn't have the scrambling ability he used to, but he is still very much able and willing to take shots down the field. So I think in this game against the Giants, it's going to be more of the same. Russ did not look good in like the first quarter last week. Finally settled in, and then he was awesome after that. So I think, knocked off some of the rust. Maybe we see that again at the beginning of the game, trying to get settled within, seeing the looks from a new defense, different defense. Giants have been better on defense maybe than we would otherwise recognize, but I still like Pickens quite a bit in this matchup. I think moving forward, he's probably going to start looking like a top 20 wide receiver from here on out. Got his first touchdown in his first game with Russ. That's obviously not a coincidence. I think we're going to see more of the same from Pickens over the rest of the year. My start of the week is definitely a cheap one because everyone's going to be starting him with Tua back, but it's Tyreek Hill. I did want to just highlight this because he has been awful, and we have not talked about him a ton because he has just been kind of an automatic sit. And if you've been starting him, like, that's just not been good. I mean, he's single digits and half PPR scoring ever since Tua went out. But in this game against Arizona, we just saw Herbert throw for 350 yards against this defense. Tua should come back and just bombs away. Tyreek Hill has been all over social media today saying how excited he is to have him back. He even said to my fantasy owners, start me this week. He said he caught a couple deep balls in practice from him, and it's just like this is going to change significantly here. Tua looks healthy. Tyreek is excited. I think he's a top 5 play this week against Arizona. Make sure he's back and locked into your wide receiver 1 spot.
Yeah, he's in a great spot this week. And I was going to mention too, like you said, with all the social media stuff. And I think this is definitely like, I don't know if you can technically call it like a squeaky wheel game, but just with how bad and uninvolved Tyreek Hill is, I think they're going to make a point to get him the ball early and often. And I think, if Arizona can effectively put up points against Miami, like maybe they have to continue throwing as well. Wheels up for Tyreek, and good to see Tua back on the field.
Moving on to your second start, we're going to talk about Amari Cooper, somebody that we told you to sit last week because of how many snaps he was going to play. But I don't know that we realized he was going to run 11 routes and get 5 targets, including a couple bombs, and look awesome and completely open up the offense. I mean, the offense looked completely different when he was on the field, and it was just very refreshing to see. So Amari Cooper, somebody who should get a bigger target share this week. What else you got for Cooper?
Yeah, I mean, 5 targets on a 35% snap share. I'm very excited to see what happens when that gets into the 90s. And we talked about it with Keon Coleman as well. Like, this whole offense, like, really getting a boost. They used Keon Coleman more. He looked great. He's not going to be going up against those number 1 corners. So I think Cooper in this one, like, obviously he's got an extra week to get more acclimated into this offense. We're going to see much higher playing time. He gets the Seahawks this week, which should be a fairly neutral game script. And I think just kind of based on the targets he got last week, like, we could be looking at double-digit targets for Cooper in this one. obviously looks like he's got a new breath of fresh air on this new team. So very excited about Cooper rest of season.
Yeah, for sure. And on Cooper's touchdown, Keon Coleman threw him a little like you gotta and he ran the route to the post and got hit. And Keon Coleman, man, what a great teammate standing at the podium, and somebody asked him about it, and he goes, "No, he knows the plays." And they're like, "Well, it looked like you gave him some sort of communication." And he said, "Well, this is something I've learned. You can't over communicate. He knows the plays. It just give him a little confirmation. It's just great teammate response there. So it shows camaraderie already with Cooper within the wide receiver room, I think. And Coleman should be stoked to be learning from somebody like Amari Cooper, who maybe didn't have as strong of a veteran presence there to learn from. And Coleman had his best game of the year too, right? He had 125 yards, led the league in receiving in week 7. So, maybe just the overall offense finally gets to open up now that they have that alpha receiver. Going on to my second wide receiver start here is JSN. I feel like I took the chalk a little bit this week with DK Metcalf being out, right? He's likely going to miss this game with an MCL sprain. Thankfully, grade 1, so he might only miss 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. They do have a week 10 bye, so I would think the most likely situation is that DK's back in week 11. But JSN, if you still have held on to him, I know he's 87% rostered, so he's started to have a little bit of cracks in his ownership percentage. He's been very disappointing. I get it if you don't want to play him, because he's only had 2 games over double-digit points, and one of them was a low yardage game where he scored a touchdown. But in this game against Buffalo, I think they're going to have to score, right? You said neutral game script, but they're going to be likely behind in this game. They're going to have to throw to keep up, even if they aren't behind. So I would guess that's going to be the game plan. Lockett and JSN, both good plays this week, I think. But JSN, I think, is somebody that could be the focal point of the offense. I think we're going to see double-digit targets for the first time since week 4. And I do think, even coming off of a 3-for-9 game, I think that this is going to be very different for him this week. Something in the 10 to 12 targets, maybe 8 receptions, maybe 70 yards and a touchdown, something like that. So I do hope that JSN has a much better game without DK Metcalf out there, and we can have at least a little bit of confidence in him moving forward and a little bit of confidence to continue to roster him.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 2 games under his belt where he's seen 12 and 16 targets. Like, Geno leads the league in both pass yards and pass attempts. Like you said, they're going to have to air it out for this one, and it's time for him to step up, man. Like, I know last year's wide receiver classes pales in comparison to this year, but he was still the number 1 wide receiver taken off the board. So this is what they drafted him for. And like you mentioned, with DK out, that's a huge hole in the offense. Love JSN this week.
Moving over to our sits for the week now. This one pains me to talk about here, but your first sit of the week is Diontae Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, everything's kind of just going bad for Carolina at the moment, right? Like, Andy Dalton's out. He was in a car accident. Like, thankfully he's okay, but he sprained his thumb. So now they've got Bryce Young back at the helm. And to make matters worse, he goes up against Denver and potentially top cornerback Patrick Surtain. I know he was ruled out with a concussion last week. I'm not 100% sure what the status of him is this week, but regardless, it's Bryce Young. He was awful with Bryce Young before Andy Dalton took over. Like, I know this maybe feels like a cheap one, but just sit Diontae. It's just brutal.
Yeah, and the fact I was getting ready to argue against you pretty good on this one, because I did really still like Diontae even against Denver. They move him around the formation. It's not like he's going to get matched up on Surtain all the time, even if Surtain is active. But there's just really no argument now that Bryce Young is the quarterback, right? I mean, we saw early in the year, it just was so ugly. It just was like, what are we supposed to do with all of these guys? Like, I'm not even sure Chuba Hubbard is a start now anymore, right? Like, Diontae last week, what I was going to say is I know he had 1 for 17, but they got down by so much, and then they couldn't move the ball with any sort of consistency. And then Washington just kept the ball away from them and just ran the clock down. The Panthers only got the ball 3 times in the second half, and they went 3 and out on all of them, I think, or they got 1 first down in the second half last week. So, like, there wasn't even an opportunity to get any sort of drive going. They had 1 drive really even in the first half that wasn't just like a 3 and out. So their offense was just completely out of sorts, and Washington was just ripping off 7-8 minute drive after 7-8 minute drive, and it was just like the game was over like that. So they barely ran any plays. So I was going to discount his game last year. Like, that was more of a situation than anything. And this week, though, with Bryce Young, I have to agree here with Diontae. My sit of the week is somebody that's a little bit different. He doesn't have a bad situation, and he's coming off a very good game, and this is Romeo Doubs. So he's just coming off a 10-target game, 8 for 94. He didn't score in this one, so that held his point total down a little bit versus the 2 scores he had in week 6. And he is playing against Jacksonville, which is an awesome matchup. It's like, wait a second. He's coming off 2 good games. He's got an excellent matchup, and now you're going to tell me to sit him? Like, I just added him. I'm excited to get him into my flex spot. Like, finally, I feel like I've been struggling with all these injuries. I have Brandon Ayuk, and now you're telling me not to play him, and I'm going to pump the brakes on Doubs here. I don't know how many times he's going to get 10 targets. 94 yards is like his 3rd highest total in his last 35 games or something like that. And I don't expect him to get this sort of volume against Jacksonville. Jaden Reed was banged up last week. I think he's going to be more healthy. He only got like 3 targets, I think 2 for 10. And I think Reed is going to be a little bit more of a focal point in this game against Jacksonville that can give up deep passes, right? The deep passing in this game is going to be much more attainable. I think Christian Watson, who's going to be healthy, is going to be more involved than his 2 for 9. And I think Doubs, he can still obviously command some targets, but if he gets 6 targets and it's like a 3 for 30 and he doesn't get into the end zone, I think a game like that could be coming as they try and get the 2 outside receivers, or I shouldn't say outside, the 2 deep ball receivers going in this offense. So Jacksonville can also be God on the ground, so this could be a Jacobs day. Jacobs has been looking better, honestly. Finally caught a touchdown, right? Got that in there. So I think overall the Packers offense, like we talk about all the time, it's just very crowded. And I think this week in a game where they should be able to take some shots, Doubs is not going to be as much a part of the game plan.
Yeah, I mean, last week Wicks had 6 targets, Reed had 4, Watson had 2, Kraft had 4. But like you mentioned, like we don't ever know like how that's going to shake out. And I think in this one, like you mentioned, with being able to expose Jacksonville with the deep ball, like I really like Christian Watson as like a boom bust flex. I know there's no one on bye this week, so you're probably not starting Watson, but maybe in like a daily fantasy or something just with his upside. But you're right, man. Like they could also pound it out on the ground. Like it's just like too good of a game script to like, it just feels too good to be true.
Yeah. And the other thing too, right? Say they hit Reed on a touchdown and they hit Watson on a touchdown and then they grind it out and kick a field goal. And their defense is able to hold Jacksonville through their first 2 drives, and all of a sudden they're up 17-0. Like, I just don't know how much more they're going to be trying to just air it out or throw it. So I don't know. Like, they'll obviously still throw it, but they're not going to rack up volume in the 40 pass attempt range, and they're not going to be playing from behind like they were against Houston. So, like we said, it looks like such a good spot. It looks like somewhere where you're going to be like, yes, 2 good games. He's got a good matchup. Let's get him in there. And I'm just pumping the brakes on Doubs there. So that I just wanted to bring him up as a sit for that reason. Your second sit, I feel like, is a little bit of a cheap sit because he is not a starter and he doesn't play. But let's talk about Xavier Worthy anyways.
I kind of wanted to call out Xavier Worthy just because, this actually has nothing to do with the DeAndre Hopkins joining the team. I think Hop will probably have a low snap share in this game, even if he plays. But with Worthy, like, you need him to score to have any sort of value. The most touches he's had in any game is 5. In the games where he hasn't scored, he put up 3, 4, and 4 half PPR points. Like, I get it. The upside is tantalizing. He's the fastest player on the field. He can hit on a bomb. He's got Patrick Mahomes throwing him the ball. He's facing off against the Raiders this week.
Mattered.
Yeah, right. And it's just
Mahomes
like
throwing hasn't mattered. He's been horrible.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's weird. And against the Raiders, like it's kind of like what we talked about with Doubs. Like the matchup is so good, but what are the Chiefs doing? They're just playing great defense and playing keep away on the ground. So they're just they're not going to let
20 plus plus carries a game too.
Yeah, and it's just the Raiders aren't going to put up points on the Chiefs, and they're just going to grind out the clock. And I don't like him at all this week. The reason I threw him on there is I looked at Fantasy Pros like Monday or Tuesday, and they had Worthy. And again, this was before the trade at like wide receiver 26 or something.
Oh,
I was
come
like,
on. Are you serious?
I swear, that's why I added it.
Oh,
I know
no
you.
wonder you put him on here then.
Yeah,
Oh,
dude.
that's a horrible ranking. What the heck?
Yeah, I'm sure it's
Oh, okay.
updated now,
Well,
but like, because no one wants to get caught with their tail between their legs when he goes off for a 60-yard touchdown. They're like, oh, we'll see, we had him 25, like flex
yeah,
considerations.
we got to just put him there every time. Well, I mean, I will say he's got 3 games with touchdowns and 4 total touchdowns, right? So he had a 19, 14, and 10-point game. But when he doesn't score, it's just
Yeah.
completely bottomed out, even in that 10-point game, right? I mean, he scored, he only had 40 total yards. Like, I don't know, or less. Like, I agree with you here. I don't think Worthy is a starter. I don't think he belongs anywhere near anybody's starting lineups. And Vegas is a good matchup, but again, it doesn't really matter for a player like this.
Yeah, unless they
he's
do
just
like
boom
maybe they
and
do
he's
like
going to
a
score, or he's a complete bust. He's not going to score.
maybe they just do like a flea flicker on the first play of the game or something. Just say run as far as you can. Sure, okay, that could happen. It also probably
Yeah,
won't,
and
right? Like,
yeah, it probably won't exactly. And even if it does, maybe he doesn't even catch it. And then they don't try again.
yeah,
And it's like,
that's true.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't. I'm not in on Worthy. He's wide receiver 37 on the year. I will say that's because he's had a bye week, so he will otherwise would be quite a bit higher, I would guess. But oh wow, he's 91% rostered too. I don't know. I guess maybe I should be a little higher on Worthy, but I'm just not.
And I just checked. Fantasy Pros has updated it to he's wide receiver 29 this week in half
29.
PPR.
Okay.
So they moved him down 2 whole spots. So they're not
Okay.
listening to
Well, we
us.
do talk about leagues within the context of 3 wide receiver, and so that is a starter according to them in 3 wide receiver leagues. So I do take back my hate on calling this a
Thank you.
a cheap one. Yeah, no,
Thank you.
that was good to bring him up then. If that's where people are going to be looking at him, especially with all the injuries, right? I mean, if you had Worthy on your bench and say you had DK and Ayuk on your team, which could have happened, you're struggling. So I would still sit Worthy in that case. My second sit of the week here is going to be, again, another unpopular one where, a little bit lower, but is Jauan Jennings. So a lot of people went out and spent a lot of fab to get him. He is wide receiver 18 on the year, if you can believe that, but that is fueled entirely by that game in week 3. He has not been that involved, and I know Ayuk just got hurt, but my point I'm going to make here, the main point is when he blew up, he was taking Debo's role, not Ayuk's role. And I know he had 12 targets, and I know Ayuk also had 12 targets in that game, and he significantly outperformed Ayuk and all that stuff. But that was a career game. This is not somebody that they even look at necessarily as somebody they want to have as their starter long term. The trade rumors around this team started immediately. So, I mean, we could get into his rest of season value, but I kind of did that already in the waiver wire video. And for this week, he's going up against Dallas, who, I guess they're a little bit gettable through the air, but I just don't know that it's going to be Jennings with Kittle there, especially if Debo plays. I guess I should roll this back quite a bit if Debo doesn't play. If Debo's pneumonia is going to hold him out of this game, then I'd be a little bit more inclined to play Jennings. The other factor that didn't play in earlier in the season is Ricky Pearsall. I think that the 49ers used a first-round pick on him. They do think he's a very good yards after catch receiver, and they want to get him involved. So it's not going to be something where the targets are going to get concentrated so much in 2 players. I think Pearsall will be on the field, and he'll also be garnering targets from the wide receiver position in a way that one outlier game just didn't have for Jennings. So I'm not sure really that I want to start him this week. And long term, if they bring somebody in, they're on bye next week. I don't know. McCaffrey's back. I don't know exactly how this is all going to play out. So that's why I didn't end up spending a bunch on Jennings anyway.
Yeah, I guess what I'll add to that is if you do have Jennings, just monitor what's going on with the Niners because Kittle, Debo, Jennings all missed practice on Wednesday. The Debo thing, it's such an unknown with pneumonia, and it's tough to say if he's going to come back. And I think if Debo does miss, I would be comfortable playing him here because I guess the other point too is if you just went to the waiver wire, you spent a bunch of money, this might be the time to play him. He's got a bye next
the only
week.
Time to get to play him.
Yeah, and it's just if you spent 15-20% of your fab and you're in a pinch, I totally get it. And I think with Debo out, like you said, he's a much better start, but definitely keep your eye on the injury reports this week.
Moving over to the sleepers, we've got Jalen McMillan as our first sleeper here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think this one kind of goes hand in hand with the two injuries we had at wide receiver on this team. But take it away with what you got for us on Jalen McMillan.
Yeah, obviously pretty tough blow for the Buccaneers. That was pretty bad, and feel awful for Godwin and Evans too. Like, we don't know the extent of how long that's going to last. Hopefully he can come back healthy, because they're definitely going to need him. And McMillan, I understand he kind of got bucketed into that number 3 receiver at Washington behind Odunze and Jalen Polk, kind of just due to last year's stats and the draft capital. But last year at Washington, he was kind of in and out of the lineup all year due to injuries. The prior year, he scored more touchdowns than Rome. Both those guys were over 1,000 yards to Polk's 690. The year before that, he led the Huskies in receiving. He was the 6th-ranked wide receiver prospect in the 2020 class. And importantly, in my opinion, he did earn the role out of camp as the number 3 receiver. He obviously missed a few games due to injury, but he can play all over the field. And when he earned that number 3 role, that was more of an outside type role with Godwin in the slot. But his last year at Washington, he played 67% of the snaps in the slot. So it will be interesting to see how they kind of utilize him in this offense. But regardless of alignment, like, Baker's going to continue to throw the ball. They get the Falcons this week, who are a middle-of-the-road defense, but they should be able to put up points on the Bucs. So I would expect a high-volume passing game from Baker, and we know he's going to force the ball. So even if he turns it over a couple times, I think McMillan's going to get a healthy share of targets in this one.
Yeah, and McMillan had 8 targets last week. So he was hurt, didn't really play a lot last week, but then came out 60% of the snaps, 8 targets. And I know Evans got hurt pretty early in the game, so he was kind of taking on those targets. It felt like a little bit, and Godwin got hurt on the second last play of the game. So Godwin was out there the whole time with him. So I think it's interesting you mentioned the slot, because if he gets that role, I think he has a lot better chance of actually having some sort of fantasy floor here. So, he didn't do anything with his 8 targets. So I should say that also. This is a role thing. We're watching a role change here. Get him onto your roster, and just check out what happens here. Because even if there's a trade, like you mentioned, right, he was their number 3. So if he moves up to their number 1 on the depth chart, even if they make a trade to bring in a new wide receiver, he's going to go down to number 2 until Evans is back. So, there could be a 3-week window here where he actually has quite a bit of value. They play Atlanta, Kansas City, and the 49ers. So those second 2 are pretty difficult matchups. I'm mainly rooting for him because I hope that he's good enough to allow Baker to continue to produce, because Baker has been just awesome this year. And without Evans and Godwin, who the heck knows what's going to happen with the offense, really. So fingers crossed that he looks maybe better than we expect. And I like the sleeper call here, especially just to highlight how different his role is going to be, and that he was a talented player coming in. So it's not exactly like he's going to come out of nowhere if he looks good this week. My sleeper of the week is somebody that just had a very good week here, right, is Cedric Tillman. So Tillman was not really playing at all. We thought it was going to be Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy that kind of took over from the Amari Cooper hole that was left. And that was not necessarily the case. Tillman came in and played on 82% of the snaps after having not topped 40 in any game. He got 12 targets, led the team, tied with David Njoku at 8 for 80. He caught a 2-point conversion. Elijah Moore, again, 6 for 40, kind of played close to the line of scrimmage, didn't get even close to the workload Cedric Tillman did. Jeudy obviously was decent, but if Jeudy is going to be attracting number 1 corner attention and Tillman is going to be the guy they look to as a volume play, I think that there's possibly something here, especially with Jameis Winston. I mean, we've been calling for Winston to take over the offense. He's going to start in week 8, and if he starts the rest of the year, there could be a decent level of upside for Tillman here if he's going to get that Amari Cooper volume and get the connection with Winston kind of figured out early. So Winston did not play until the very end of this game, right? He threw the touchdown to Njoku and he threw the 2-point conversion to Cedric Tillman. But I think overall, Tillman is likely the guy, even after just seeing it for 1 week, that I would want in this offense at receiver now. So I do think against Baltimore, they're going to be down. Baltimore can be got in the air on defense. We know that. Baker just threw for 370 and 3 touchdowns. I know he threw 2 picks as well, but it's not like Baltimore's been really stopping very many teams in the air. So it's a decent spot for Winston's first start here, I think. They're not expected to win. If he throws a bunch of picks, doesn't matter. And, you can just keep loading it up, keep trying to throw it. And I think Tillman might be the beneficiary in the wide receiver room here.
Winston's definitely going to be slinging it. And those 2 picks that Baker threw, I would imagine the betting line for a Jameis Winston interception is like minus 250 or something in this game. But It was interesting. One thing I saw
over under set at 2.5. Yeah,
it's going to be a must-watch television, honestly. If they're down 3 scores and you just say go throw it on every play,
slinging it, dude.
but one thing I thought was so interesting when I was watching all of Tillman's plays was he had an end zone target from Deshaun Watson, DTR, and Jameis Winston, which is that like an NFL record, having an end zone target from 3 different quarterbacks in one game?
Probably. I don't know that 4 have ever played, so it has to be, yeah.
Right? Like, I understand, it was a weird scenario, but it's just like,
dude,
I was like, wait.
That's like one of those WTF facts, that you see on Instagram. It's just like, oh, okay, yeah, it was the NFL record. 3 end zone targets from 3 different quarterbacks.
Dude, save that for Jeopardy. At some point, it's going to come up. Ken Jennings is going to ask it. You're going to call me. We're going to get it. But, yeah. I mean,
just to win a bar bet. Which receiver has 3 different end zone targets from 3 quarterbacks in a game? Tillman.
Yeah. So for you, would you prefer to play him over Jeudy this week?
I would. Yeah, I would definitely be playing him, and I would be. If Judy's the end of your last guy on your bench, I personally would be comfortable cutting Jeudy to add Tillman. I really think we don't see this happen very often with a massive change in role. I really think that they moved on from Cooper with the intent to have Tillman fill his role. That is what I think happened here based on how it worked out, because I was watching the game and I was like, why, like, who is this? It started as like, why is he on the field, to like, oh, he's definitely better than Moore, to, wait, this is like their second year guy that's like 6'3", 210. Like, this is their guy. That's how it felt to me. So that's why I'm saying it now. And I think you should get in front of it. He should be added everywhere, in my opinion, but he's probably not going to be. He's probably going to be 35% owned probably. But if he does it again, he's going to be back on waiver wire columns as the number 1 ad next week, especially if he scores with Winston against Baltimore.
I was going to say, we might have to add him to beat the waiver wire this week.
Yeah, he'll be on there for sure. We're going to talk more about Tillman, and I think he's a sleeper this week. I mean, I think they're going to have to play, and like over Worthy, I'd be playing him ahead of Xavier Worthy this week.
Yeah, I like that.
Moving on to our busts for the week. Number 1, this one hurts. This one is also tied to a quarterback, but it's Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, so Terry's been great, right? He's scored double-digit fantasy points each week since week 3. He's wide receiver 13 on the season. And, this take is obviously twofold, right? Like, if Jaden Daniels misses this game, like, you cannot start McLaurin under any circumstances. I know Mariota came in and he performed admirably, but Carolina was just so depleted. Like, that was just the perfect game script for him to come in and look like his old, I guess, Heisman self. But even if Daniels does play, like, I would start Terry, right? But I'm still kind of picturing him more as a bust. Bears are excellent against the pass. They've only given up 3 touchdowns to opposing wide receivers on the season. Not to mention the Commanders run the ball a ton. I think it's like the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. Bears can be got a little bit more on the ground. But yeah, man, it doesn't sound optimistic for Daniels at this point. So you got to go in a different direction.
Yeah, so you're saying go in a different direction. So are you sitting him? Or is you just think he's a bust?
Well, the take is
it's going to be hard to get away from him, but even against the Bears, I think it's going to be tough for him to have any running room. I mean, I could see 3 for 30 here, no scores.
Yeah, so the take is bust with Daniels, but sit with Mariota.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, so and if it is Mariota, unfortunately, I think that could be what we see here as they try and protect Daniels from himself, from getting absolutely drilled in the open field. maybe he does some sliding drills this week, goes over to the baseball field and learns how to slide on second base. Yeah. Dude, it's just, oh my God, I still can't believe he took that hit after running for 45 yards. Like, dude, like, why? It didn't make any sense. Anyways.
Yeah, it's like you don't need your Heisman moment.
I like to take McLaurin.
You're here. Yeah. Like,
yeah, you're an NFL quarterback, dude. It's all about just staying upright. But yeah, so moving on to my bust of the week, and this is going to be very unpopular. Again, another guy that you're excited to start. I feel like I'm just pouring water on the hot coals this week, on just guys that are everybody's excited about. But I have Cooper Kupp as my bust for this week. I know if you have him, you've been itching to play him. He's been out for 4 weeks at this point, 5 if you include his bye week. And this is a combination of they get Minnesota, so it's going to be like a tough defense that they're going to be playing against. I know Minnesota maybe scores quite a bit, but Minnesota should also have success running the ball, so the number of possessions could be down. And also, just coming off of this injury, I just am not we haven't seen him yet, so I don't know exactly how he's going to look in his first game back. I know when he came back from his hamstring last year, I mean, it was like 5 catches in the first quarter, and we're like, oh, here we go. This is like just regular Cooper Kupp. But and then it ended up kind of tailing off after that. But I saw him, he's getting ranked inside top 10s, and I just am not sure I'm ready to go there. You're obviously starting him, okay? It's not a question of if you're going to start him or not. I'm sure Stafford is so excited to have him back. But unfortunately, I think this week it's just going to be tough sledding, short week for the rest of the offense. And, the offense is running through Kyren Williams. So, they're going to try and run the ball back at Minnesota and maybe try and control the clock. And Kupp could see 10 targets here, 12 targets, but again, his per target numbers early in the season, even though he had a huge game in week 1, his per target numbers weren't that good, 5 yards a target. So if his efficiency picks up to 7 a target, and he's getting 10 targets, maybe that's 70 yards. And if he doesn't score, because Stafford has still only thrown 3 touchdowns, and one of them was to Cooper was to Kupp in week 1, so maybe he scores, maybe he doesn't. And I just think the expectations maybe 6 for 70 in this game, and that's maybe less than you're hoping for with, kind of getting your wide receiver 1 back.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. But at the same time, too, it's like if they're serious about trading him, they want to show that he is fully healthy, fully capable, can command 15 targets in this game. It's so tough to run on the Vikings, too. Like, I don't know. I don't like this call because I'm so excited to watch Cooper Kupp on Thursday Night Football.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I feel like I'm just pouring water on the fire of all these players.
God. So, I don't know. And Jordan Whittington's out, and it's like Stafford's got his guy back. Stafford's still a good real-life quarterback. I don't like this.
Yeah, all these other guys don't matter. Just consolidate the whole wide receiver room into Kupp. He's going to get all of them. It just feels like he's going to be the focal point.
And do you think, I guess, what's your temperature on the trade rumors with if they lose this game?
That doesn't matter for this week.
Just in general,
that doesn't really matter for this week. But on the trade rumors, I mean, I don't think they're getting a second round pick for him. I know a bunch of teams called, but I think they're trying to figure out how to get rid of all of his contract in order to get a second round pick. But I'd be shocked if anybody goes up and gives up a second round pick, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. I guess Adams went for a third and Cooper went for a third, so maybe Kupp is more valuable than that and should get a second. But I don't know. Why would somebody that's on the fringe maybe doesn't even make the playoffs to give up a second? Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The team he's rumored to are the Steelers, and we saw the Lions. I thought that was interesting. 49ers, Bucks. Maybe the Bucks do it because they're so hurt and Godwin is out for the year, and Kupp is kind of an easy 1-for-1 replacement for Godwin. They play very similarly. So maybe, but I don't know. This, like you said, it's second round pick is just a tall order for a guy that you're renting. All right, now we're going to move into the cornerback wide receiver matchups. So this is the new section. We're excited to start talking about this. So the first guy we're going to start with is Sauce Gardner, right? And he goes up against the Patriots. And the reason we're going to start with this one is because the Patriots don't really have anybody outside that's going to match up against him very clearly, right? I mean, maybe your boy Booty is going to be out there against him. Booty is going to be out there. See, I don't even know how to say his name yet. Maybe he's out there playing against Sauce, but there's not really an obvious 1-for-1. Douglas moves around the formation, plays in the slot quite a bit. That's who the targets are going to be going to. Henry, again, second target getter here, coming from the tight end position, not going to match up against Sauce. So I just wanted to discuss him, get that one out of the way first. The second one, Surtain, if he goes, will likely match up against Diontae quite a bit, and potentially be in a shadow situation. So maybe you can elaborate on that one a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that coincides with Diontae being a sit this week. And even if he doesn't shadow him, Denver has 3 really good defensive backs, and I don't think Carolina's going to move the ball with Bryce Young anyways.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And then moving on to Jair Alexander, right? He's cornerback on Green Bay, and he's been back. He's obviously very good. They're going up against Jacksonville this week, and Brian Thomas Jr. We've kind of been trying to make the excuse to downgrade Brian Thomas Jr. because he's going up against difficult corners. And that just has been a fool's errand to this point. I mean, he's been awesome. We just watched him torch Christian Gonzalez. And so I don't know that we really even need to worry about it with Brian Thomas Jr. I think you're kind of just starting him. But what do you think about going up against Jair Alexander? I mean, that's a much better, more experienced corner than Gonzalez. So you think this is an opportunity to move Brian Thomas Jr. down?
I think speed kills, and I think Brian Thomas Jr. has a gear that not many people in this world have, and if he gets a step on him, he can fly. And Lawrence is not afraid to throw it out. And I did think it was encouraging last week to see them make a point to get BTJ involved in more short area passes too. Like, they're clearly making him the focal point of this offense. And while I don't love this matchup, like, I'm just not sitting BTJ under any circumstance right now.
Yeah, no, and I can obviously understand that after watching him go 5 for 90 and a touchdown and continue just to be on a roll against everybody other than Chicago. The next guy, Jalen Ramsey. So Miami plays Arizona this week. That means Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be playing against Ramsey, and this is going to be a shadow situation. Ramsey loves to travel and shadow the number one. He is going to be on Marv constantly in this game. So what do you think about Marv? Is that enough to push him outside of your top 20, outside of your top 25? Or what do you think? You still starting him in 3 wide receiver leagues? How are you feeling about Marv?
I thought about him as like a bust candidate this week, but he's been so bad that it's almost feels like cheating to call him a bust. I think the upside is in this game that with Tua back, they're going to be able to score on Arizona, right? And Kyler's going to have to throw the ball. And Harrison's talented enough, and he can high point the ball. I know we haven't really seen him be that great this year. I know he's caught a few touchdowns, but I don't think it's going to be for lack of opportunities in this one. So I'm cautiously optimistic. It really depends on my rosters right now. Like, I've got a league where I can start 4 wide receivers, and I lost Nico Collins and Brandon Ayuk. I'm like, okay, well, I'm obviously starting Harrison, but I'm not thrilled about it. If I'm in like a 2 wide receiver league and I can get away from him in this matchup, then yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think I agree. I think I'm going to have Marv ranked around 25 this week, just because Ramsey and the fact that Miami is actually going to be able to hang on to the ball. If Arizona was just going to be able to control the ball constantly and be able to throw it, I still have a lot of faith in Harrison. I think Kyler has been his problem. Kyler's just been really bad as a passer over the last 4 weeks specifically. I mean, he's been atrocious. And I feel like it's because they're not scheming Marv open more. And I feel like it's because Marv isn't his first read on every play. It just should be, if Marv is getting open, you're just going to go there. So I don't know. I think this is more on Kyler and on the offensive system than it is on Marv at all. So I still have a lot of faith there that they're going to get it figured out.
And what day does Call of Duty come out? I'm not a gamer, but I know that negatively impacts Kyler, right?
I'm not sure, but yeah, I think it does come out around this time, actually.
I think it's this weekend. I don't know. I've been seeing a lot of commercials on it.
Yeah. God, it's coming out this week, and Double XP is going to be coming up in 2 weeks, and it's going to be just Kyler grinding away until 2 a.m. That's why you can't focus.
Oh, my gosh.
But yeah, so
October 25th, Friday.
Okay, Friday. Oh, great. So he's going to be playing all night on Friday and all night on Saturday before the game. Oh, man. He hates these allegations, too. He has to answer for them all the time.
He's got it.
The fact that the Cardinals tried to put it in his contract is hilarious to me. I mean, it's just so funny. You limit his hours on COD.
It's unbelievable.
But yeah, so anyways, hopefully they get that figured out. But this week against Ramsey, I think Marv is closer to a sit even than a bust, right? The bust is somebody you're starting that might not be performing well, but Marv is somebody that I think you can potentially in this matchup try and get away from. In 2 wide receiver leagues with a flex, I think it would be a lot easier, but in your 3 wide receiver leagues, you're likely going to have to just start Marv. The second to last guy we want to talk about is Ward going up against Baltimore, right? The Cleveland cornerback. And he is going to be going up against Zay Flowers, but Zay Flowers moves around the formation quite a bit. And So I don't know how impactful it's going to be for him just one-on-one to be, out of the game because of cornerback. I think the Baltimore game flow and game plan has a lot more to do with whether or not Flowers is going to be good. And so, like, we saw him only get one target last week after having 9 for 9 for 132 yards the week before. The roller coaster is just insane with Flowers right now.
Yeah.
But, I don't think that Ward is necessarily going to warrant a Flowers sit.
Yeah, I mean, you're not starting Aguilar or Bateman anyways, and with Flowers too. I mean, you were clowning me last week when he was my bust, and you were like, "No, dude, he's just gonna rock and roll this week." Blah blah blah, and he sucked. Of course.
I mean, to be fair, Lamar threw for 285 and 5 touchdowns. So,
Yeah.
right. I mean, I didn't think that Flowers was going to be the one game planned out. I mean, literally, it's like Andrews had 2 touchdowns. Bateman got the deep shot. Who the heck even, like, Hill had one of them. Henry had one of them. It's like, okay, I'll take the L for saying that, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just assumed the passing game was going to be fine against Tampa Bay, and the passing game was
It
fine against Tampa Bay.
yeah.
Flowers did nothing. I will say, too, Flowers did get banged up in this game early. He got hurt on one of his first couple carries, ankle got rolled up on, but he still went out there and continued to play. So I think it also might have been a thing where he was a little bit of a decoy out there. He was just healthy enough to run, and they decided to go in a different direction throughout the game. The last guy I want to talk about here is Christian Gonzalez. We mentioned him getting burned by Brian Thomas Jr. last week, and he gets a matchup this week with Davante Adams. So again, this is not somebody that I think I'm going to be afraid to start Adams because of, and so I think we're just kind of roll over this one, fire up Adams. They might move Adams around the formation a little bit. Maybe Gonzalez ends up on Garrett Wilson for some of the snaps, that kind of thing. But I think overall, you're not sitting Adams or Wilson because of Christian Gonzalez.
Yeah, maybe temper expectations with Adams a little bit more. I would expect him to be on Adams more, but Adams wins in different ways than Brian Thomas Jr., right? Like his route running, his breaks off the ball. So I think he'll be okay. And I think, like we've talked about with Aaron Rodgers, like they have another week to prepare for this game. It's not like this is the first good cornerback that Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers have ever seen. But I do kind of like Wilson a little bit more in this game, the more that I think about it. I mean, we've seen at least through 1 week that they can coexist pretty well in terms of targets.
Yeah,
at least.
they both got 9 targets.
Yeah.
I do think that Adams is going to I do think there's going to be more targets for Adams, but I also think there's going to be more targets for Wilson. I don't think there's going to be very many games with both of these guys out there that Breece Hall is going to get 9. Breece Hall can do that, but I don't think that's going to be the goal. They were going up against Pittsburgh, a defense that's very good against receivers as well, and just a very good defense in general. I think they got Breece going early in the passing game. It's like, oh, this is working. We're just going to stick with this. So I do think both of them have potential for double-digit targets here. I think, again, they want to get their offense going. So I don't think this is something where they're going to take their foot off the gas. I think they're going to be going go, 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 go. They're really going to try and get their offense figured out and established here. And I think Adams and Wilson should be beneficiaries, regardless of the corner that they're going up against. All right. With that, thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully this cornerback wide receiver breakdown was good. Let us know in the comments if you like it, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.
Later.